It's the silence, followed by the noise. It's the welcoming brew around the table.
And the pounding adrenaline of your first call out.
From a plume of water bursting from the ground,
to being soaked in sweat from the heat.
It's successfully planning an event at short notice, and the pride of pulling on a shirt for the first time.
Today, it's the panic on people's faces.
Tomorrow, it's the support from the communities we serve.
It's feeling anxious about starting a new role, only to be supported and inspired by amazing colleagues.
It's comforting families who've lost loved ones.
And heartfelt thanks from those we have saved.
It's the gravity of shutting down an unsafe business to turning around the lives of vulnerable people.
It's the driving grotto that makes Christmas that little bit brighter.
And the humour that gets you through stressful times.
From training that pushes you to your limits.
Making positive changes and challenging the status quo.
It's feeling excited, included and exhilarated.
Yet having the space to feel vulnerable and exhausted too.
It's the memories that stick with you for life, the good ones and the bad.
It's a great feeling, serving your community.
It's great to be part of something bigger than yourself.
And it's great that no day is the same.
It's all of these things that make us who we are.
It's all these things that make us Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service.
This is me.
This is us. And
this is our story.
Proud to be rated good by HMIC FRS.
think we've got some new gadgets today. So we've got the green button to press when people want to speak, and obviously I've got an additional button to override people. Welcome, Helen, to Helen Han? Yes. Right, welcome to your first Fire Authority meeting. Thank you. Okay,
And Andrew, it's your first meeting.
Oh yes, and Andrew, your first meeting. You know what it is, because you were at the member seminar, so my apologies for that. So, good morning everyone, and welcome to Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Authority meeting on the 28th of February. Can we start the meeting? Item 1, apologies for absence.
Chair, we have apologies from Robert Corden and Callum Lee.
Chair, we also have apologies from the Police and Crime Commissioner and Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner Andrew Candela is substituting today.
Well, I would say the meeting's a bit snug, but it's a bit snug this time, but we'll do the best. Any declarations of interest? No. Are we all happy with the minutes of the meeting of the 13th of December? Yeah. We all happy?
Well, the year's wrong, yeah.
The year's wrong? Yeah. I noticed that the year is wrong, but yes, I think we are in.
Sorry.
Okay, so moving on to Chair's announcements. I've got 2 Chair's announcements. We'll be pleased that the planning has actually passed for Bestwood Lodge. It's been going on 3 years, so that's fantastic. So our 3-year journey hopefully will be coming to an end. We'll see the proceeds come to authority at some point. So I'm sure members will be pleased with that, especially members who have been on the Fire Authority for some time. And the other announcement that I have is that you'll all would have received an email about the Fire Authority coming under MHCLG. And from the 1st of April, we'll have Alex Norris, the MP for Nottingham North, and Kimberley will be the Minister for Fire, which I think from the Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service is good. We've got an MP on our doorsteps that we can actually contact. And I think it probably will be good at some point that we invite him to one of our meetings and perhaps take him around the city and the county to see the fire service. One of the things I did say to him when I met him and congratulated him was to say, the fire service actually needs more funding. I'm sure members will be pleased with that. The next item is a key item, budget proposals for 24-25 to 28-29. Apologies, jumping ahead, membership announcements.
I just need to advise you formally that Councillor Rourke has been nominated by the City Council to replace Councillor Salma Mumtaz, and the County Council have appointed Councillor Helen Ann Smith to replace Councillor Pauline Allen. I would also just ask members to complete the related party transaction form, please, that have been placed in front of you, and they'll be collected if you've done it at the end of the meeting. That's only for pre-existing members, not for 2 new members. Thank you.
Tom.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And I just wanted to really use this opportunity to say welcome to Councillor Rold and Andrew, welcome to Helen. I don't think it will have mistaken members to see that the independent group is getting bigger by the day. I'm very blessed to be the longest standing group leader on this authority, and now we are getting a bigger group. And I'd only ask that our group is respected as much as possible, treated in the same way as the others. I noticed today that we weren't allocated a group meeting like Labour and the Tories were, but we intend to provide scrutiny from an independent perspective. But I'm certainly very proud to welcome my friend Helen Ann and hopefully a new friend to be Councillor Rule as part of the independent group. So we'll provide some good scrutiny on this authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollis. I'm not too sure what the arrangements are, but I'm sure the Fire Authority will ensure that future meetings are arranged that you can actually have a briefing of the independent Ashfield Council independent group. And welcome Councillor Rule to the Fire Authority. Okay, if we go back to the main agenda. Get used to that. Let's actually move to item 6, budget proposals for 25-6 to 28-29 and options for the council tax for 25-26. I could ask Bev to present the paper.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. So this report sets out the proposals for the revenue and capital budget for 25-26, and it also outlines the MTFP period up to 28-29. And that's to allow members to determine the level of council tax for 25-26. It also sets out the fees and charges for 25-26 for members' approvals, and it seeks the approval of the continued payment of members' allowances for 25-26 in accordance with the approved scheme. So in terms of the budget requirement for 25-26, so table 1 of the report sets out that budget requirement, and it shows that we have got a balanced budget proposed for 25-26 with the use of the £260,000 of the budget pressures reserve on the basis of the assumption that the £5 council tax flexibility is taken. I won't go through the detail of all the sort of movements in and out of the budget in terms of the net revenue cost. I'll just highlight the changes since the report to Finance and Resources Committee in January. So in terms of the funding, in terms of council tax, we obviously received the information from the billing authorities, and that does show that we've got a 1.5% increase in our council tax base, which creates an additional 466,000 in terms of that increase in base. There's also a surplus on the council tax account for previous years of 43,000, so that's been taken into account in that position. We've also received information now around the business rates from the billing authorities, and that means we've got an increase in the business rates income of £295,000, so that's been taken into account. We've also received the notification from Home Office on the 13th of February regarding specific grants that we get. So that does mean in terms of the pensions grant that we're waiting for confirmation on, we have got the pensions grant again in 25-26 at the same level we got in 24-25 of 1.6 million. In terms of some specific grants, we got notification that the filing grant was being removed, so that removed £159,000 from the budget. It confirmed the fire protection uplift grant, but there was an allocation for 6 months, with a further 6 months being confirmed later in the year, and it confirmed the new dimensions grant. Table 2 of the report sets out the comparison of council tax options. So it sets out that if we had a 0% increase, we'd have a £1.9 million deficit in this year, going up to 6.8 in 27-28. If we had a 2.95% increase, it'd be just over £1 million in 25-26, going up to 2.8 in 27-28. And with the budget shortfall for the £5 precept, that is a 260 for 25-26 that's going to be met from the budget pressures reserve, and then obviously going up to the 2 million in 27-28. Table 3 of the report sets out the impact of the £5 increase on each of the bands, and identifies what that annual increase is, and it works out that it's an increase of 10p for a band D property per week, and a 6p increase in a band A property. The report then goes on to go through the capital programme. So the capital programme is there to sustain the community mismanagement plan. It has increased in relation to the report that went to Finance and Resources to 9.1 million. The majority of that increase is due to slippage on the programme from 24-25 into 25-26, 2.4 million of that change. Then there's been an additional 3 vehicles added for community safety, and an increase of 128k in the programme for pumping appliances due to some modifications required to standard appliances. The full capital programme is shown in Appendix E to the report. The last section of the report is my comments on the budget as the Treasurer. So under Section 25 of the Local Government Act, I'm required to report on the robustness of the estimates in the budget and the adequacy of reserves. And the 2.64 and 2.65 identify that, bearing in mind the financial risk assessment undertaken, the reserves are adequate to support the budget in 25-26, and that I'm satisfied that they're accurate and robust budget assumptions have been made in preparing the budget. The legal implications of the report point out that we have a deadline to notify the billing authorities of the precept, and that deadline is the 1st of March. So we need to agree the council tax increase to be able to notify the preceptors in this meeting today. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Bev. Could you, when you say we notified the billing, is that in terms of raising the council tax bills to residents?
Yes. It's a statutory deadline.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Bill. I think before I open question, I think it's just really, I think we really just need to acknowledge the work that Bev and her team have actually put in this budget together. We as members saw the budget strategy earlier on in the year, and then obviously the detail was that has gone through the Finance and Resources Committee. I think where we were projecting the deficit being much higher than what it is now, I think it's a testament to the work that Bev has done on her team. That said, I think that we can't be complacent, because looking forward, there are challenges ahead. Hence why I think it's important that we engage with the minister to ensure that we actually get adequate funding for the fire authority. Because as we've seen with the round of funding that's come through, the fire authority didn't get any additional money, and the demands on the fire service, I think, will only continue to grow as we see further housing developments, more complex types of housing, and changing in the environment and the climate. So I think it's important that we do what we can to support Bev and the team in actually pulling forward this budget. And actually now open it. Any questions from members? Councillor Drosny?
Thank you, Chair. I note your comments about Mr Norris first, and I hope you have better luck than we have. He's taken £9 million of funding out of Ashfield for Levelling Up Fund, and has not responded to letters or emails from the authority or me. So if you want to give him a sharp elbow in the ribs, that would be very welcome. I hope we here have a much better relationship with him than he's had for the rest of the colleagues across the county, for whom he's shown complete disdain and disregard. I've got a number of questions, really. I mean, I'm very disappointed that we've not been offered a budget briefing in any regard. The opportunity to go through this paperwork in detail, we've not been afforded any of the courtesies that we've been afforded every other year, and I appreciate there's a huge amount of new people at the top table, including yourself, Chair, and Bev in her first budget, but we've not been given the opportunity to scrutinise this, and expected to turn up to a meeting where papers have arrived in detail this week and vote for what is, in my opinion, a pretty poor budget compared to other years, and I thought last year's wasn't great, and it's been borne out by the baseline budget of creating a surplus in council tax last year. Under budgeting is just as bad as over budgeting. It's just not getting the numbers right. I'm sure Pete Hudson wouldn't be proud of us looking over a report like that. So I'm disappointed. I appreciate, Beth, that wasn't you that's created last year's budget, but it's created far more questions for me than answers. So I don't know who, and members will have to forgive me, but quite frankly, we didn't get a members' budget briefing for our group where we had that opportunity, so I'm going to ask all my questions now, and they will inform how I vote on this. So page 14, 2.7 is the work to identify savings, 214,000. Can we have a full breakdown of what those savings are? Page 15, table 1 and page 19 talks about the budget surplus of council tax, £43,000 in surplus, which was obviously for the last year, but is a gift into this year's budget. How did we get the figures wrong last year when we were encouraged to put council tax up and we didn't get the maths right? I'm very curious to know that. At page 16, the pay award, can we have the staff costs for the increase for senior management staff? There's a huge amount of paperwork here about the 1% increase and all of the other pay awards that have gone on for day-to-day and uniform staff, but obviously the establishment has increased as well. And given the narrative in point 2.7 on page 14, which talks about the desire to make savings not in staff. The staffing budget has gone up, and that's not just in firefighters. So I wonder if the Chief might want to explain that. On page 17, 2.18, can we have a detailed explanation of what those figures are with regards to fuel savings? I'm particularly interested about the police savings or reduction of our income there. That obviously strikes me as the police aren't doing very much driving about anymore, which is probably no doubt why crime's spiralling out of control since we've got a new police and crime commissioner that's missing in action. But I'd be very interested to hear that. At page 20, actually I think I've missed one out. Yeah, page 20, 2.41, the current minimum reserves that we've set is 4.3 million, and I'm wondering when that was last reviewed and whether we count it as prudent in the context of the overall changes to the substantive budget. Obviously we've got significantly more than that, £800,000 over what is the minimum, but I'm wondering if the minimum's still pitched at the right level now or whether it's classed as overly cautious. Page 23, 2.57, there's nearly £2.5 million of slippage with no explanation of what that £2.5 million of slippage is. And then in the next item, 2.58, it says we will reflect if there's any further slippage. I'd rather have some confidence that we've got the first £2.5 million worth of slippage under control before we keep slipping down a hill with no context for members. I'm annoyed about this budget because it's a bad budget. It's not sought to make any real savings except in members' allowances in the areas of governance and scrutiny and transparency and policy development in the committees where members put a huge amount of work into making sure that this authority makes better decisions, because it's made poor decisions in the almost 20 years I've sat on this authority. It's made some terrible decisions sometimes, and members have had to slowly and carefully, with evidence and hard work, unpick those decisions so that members of the public are ultimately as safe as they possibly can be with the services that we provide. So I find it abhorrent and tantamount to impertinence that it's even on the table that the Chief wants to consider making savings against members that are in the ones and 2,000s when we can increase senior staffing allowances that have not been ratified properly with that transparency. So I'd like some proper questions, and I'd like some confidence from the Chief that he's actually going to get a grip of this in future and make sure that all members of this chamber are treated with the respect that they deserve and are brought along these journeys if there are difficult decisions to make, rather than treated like voting fodder to walk through this door and put their hands up at the last thing he says. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and obviously, Bev, I'm assuming you can answer many of those questions, but I think what I would say before I pass on to Bev is that I'm not too sure what the protocol is for a group briefing. I know that there's been briefings to the full committee. There's been, obviously, it's gone through the Finance and Resources Committee. If going forward, that obviously we need to have different group briefings, then that's fine. But from my understanding, I'm not sure whether that's actually happened. If it has, I've not been aware of it. And if you haven't, and if you don't think you've been fully clear of the opportunities to contact officers, you know, as you said, you've been on the fire committee 20 years, so you know more than I do about how we're going about that. I will allow Bev and the Chief to respond specifically to your questions.
In relation to your query about the council tax base and it not being set right and then ending up in surplus, so it's based on, we're a precepting authority. We get our base information from the billing authorities, so from the district councils. They forecast what they think their base is going to be, and how the collection fund works is it's always a forecast, so there will always be differences. In reality, the actual will always be different to that forecast because it's based on assumptions about what the growth is in the number of houses in their area, and based on the number of people that are uptaking the council tax scheme So they have to forecast that, and it will end up being different. So you always end up with a deficit or surplus on your collection fund for the previous years, and that always, you know, hits then in the following year in your budget. So that's why that surplus is there this year. So that's the answer in relation to that one. In terms of the fuel saving from the police, I mean, it is, so we've got the fuel saving, then obviously we recharge it to them because they come and use our fuel. I'm not aware of any discussions on why they're using our fuel less. I think they may go elsewhere for their fuel and don't come to our anymore. But obviously it's reduced our costs, and because of that we can't recharge them, so our incomes come down. So the two net each other off in terms of the impact for our budget. In terms of the slippage on the capital programme, it has been reported through to Finance and Resources Committee, those reasons for that slippage. I think the report does reference the report in terms of the budget monitoring report, period 8 monitoring report that went to Finance and Resources Committee. So the areas where we've got slippage in this year have been things like the aerial ladder platform, purchase of those vehicles, which is just the lead into that appliance coming into service. There's been some slippage in relation to the replacement of the pumping appliances, so there's 17 appliances coming into service, and again they're doing due diligence on the first appliance that comes in, until that's got sign off, then the others will start coming to service, so that spend has slipped into next year. In relation to the reserves, you mentioned, you questioned the reserves and the 4.3. So yeah, that was a risk assessment was done in terms of that requirement and what that minimum balance needed to be. So that was presented as part of the medium-term financial strategy that came to Fire Authority in December. So it was a risk assessment completed, and that is all detailed in that report, and that set that balance at 4.3, which was an increase from the previous year where it was 4.1 million. And it is a risk assessment, and it is a minimum balance. So like as you pointed out, yes, the current level of the reserve is higher. Obviously if that's a minimum balance and one of those risks happens, you'd then utilise your reserve. So the following year you'd have that pressure then going into your budget, and you'd then have to replace and replenish that reserve to get back up to that minimum level as well. So you'd have like a double pressure. So it's quite usual to have a higher level than your minimum balance in your general fund balance. In terms of, you asked about the pay award for senior leadership, I mean, and the breakdown of it, I've not got that today, obviously in this point in time, but I can get you that information. I've not got the breakdown of that at this point.
Yeah, I suppose on that one, go backwards from that one in terms of senior leader numbers, Councillor, I'm not aware we've gone up. In fact, I believe we've gone down in terms of SLT, but I will check the numbers. In terms of those numbers when it came in, you'll recall we had a Deputy Chief Fire Officer previously. I was the Deputy Chief Fire Officer. A decision was made on a basis of a recommendation that we go to 2 Assistant Chief Fire Officers, which made a saving to the Fire Authority year in year. I think over the first 3 years because of the performance, because we're only appointed on 90% salary, so you will have appointed me either on 90 or 95% salary, depending on what my salary was as a Deputy Chief Fire Officer, and subject to my performance, it only goes up in the intervening years up to full salary. Same for the Assistant Chief Fire Officers. We had an area manager leave in terms of property and estates last year that we are in the process of replacing. But if I look at the numbers, we were at 11, I think we're currently at 9. In terms of senior pay, up to area manager, they are usually grey book. If they've come through the fire and rescue firefighter route, they're on the grey book terms and conditions still, so that's in line with national pay settlement, not local pay settlement. And same for gold book, so your principal officers, 2 Assistant Chief and myself, are through these sort of national negotiating mechanisms for senior strategic pay. So they are also set nationally, not locally. Just to give you some context nationally, not that anybody's going to weep over chiefs or what I would recommend in terms of what they are paid either. The actual, in terms of grey book and gold book, so area managers, there's about 5.5% difference in the last 3 or 4 years. Grey book have had 5.5% more pay than gold book, right, wrong, indifferent statistical fact. So actual pay rises for people on your top table have changed. So people like Bev, or if you think about local government, LGPS pension people, area managers are on the same base pay in this authority, so whether you're head of HR or you're head of response, you've got the same base rate of pay and leave. That was something we did a number of years ago to bring equity and equality to those pay scales around SLT as well. The only difference then occurs where somebody is on flexi duty, so for example our area managers response, they get something like 30% more because of the reductions in offices we did a number of years ago. We had 5 area managers at one point, we went down to 3 as part of cost cuttings some years ago. I can have a look at your point outside if you wish about the numbers and where, if we're competing different figures, because I'd be curious to know in terms of how you're seeing it, because that'd be useful to me as well. So in terms of that, so on the governance thing, I'll go back to, I think it was the April or May or June of 2022, where members were really clear about a governance review, top to bottom, because there'd been some issues that were for a number of years hadn't been looked at around the constitution, delegation of powers, numbers of committees, and it was very clear from the groups is that they expected us to deliver a review of governance in the fire authority, and that was the basis I was working on under the previous chair, and of course the clerk may wish to contribute to that. That's what I'm trying to do, and the discussion paper that came forward was areas we might want to discuss to give a steer from, get a steer from members. We're certainly not proposing anything. I don't believe anything's been proposed, but there's been discussions about we might want to consider this or we might want to consider that, and we've been very, certainly your independent group through Councillor Hollis has been very clear of your position, and I believe that's what we're taking into account and why it was discussed at group leaders as a discussion paper, not that we believe you're voting fodder. I know why I'm sat here, Councillor. I know in terms of your role as scrutiny and assurance that you seek from me. In terms of the slippage, there are some things we can control in terms of try and do less with the resources we've got, because being over-ambitious sometimes means that you do create some slippage. The biggest portion of the capital programme, whether it be ICT slippage or vehicles, some of that was because of post-COVID, some of that is not becoming a particularly big issue now in terms of supply chain. And I'm hoping the capital programme, if we can get the appliances here, you'll start to see that significantly reduce. And we're working hard to do that, and certainly the chair has spoken to me on a number of occasions about the capital programme slippage, but in terms of expanding the detail, I'd welcome a conversation out here if you wish us to have that.
Through you, Chair, I think that would be welcome, because we've not been having those conversations, and these points about discussion about the change to governance from a member's point of view are exactly the reason why it's an abhorrent idea to reduce members' input into governance. It might want to shake up, it might want reviewing, but to stop members being involved by a huge reduction in committees on a £50 million authority is crackers. That's why we don't have the answers. And let's be right, Craig, we all know why we're sat here. I get paid £3,000 a year, you get paid more than the Prime Minister. Now, I'm not for a minute saying you don't deserve your money, or any of the top team. I think your officers are outstanding, but this is a joint venture. You bring something to the table, and so do members. We bring a lot of community expertise, local knowledge, outside world expertise, and transparency that comes from working as a joint venture. And to even consider throwing that out in the way that's been done has upset me greatly. It's really upset me. And that's why we've got questions, because all of those processes aren't working. If the governance review is to have any real teeth, it's to make it more transparent, more collaborative, more opportunities for policy development and joint working, not less. It's a real shame that that's even been considered by you. So I would welcome the opportunity to talk outside about it.
And I think if I just want to add, because I mean, this is the second time I think I've seen you, Councillor Drosley, since I've been on the fire committee. So it's a shame that we've not had the opportunity to have a conversation. Obviously, I've met with Councillor Hollis outside of this meeting. I mean, I do share your views in terms of governance. When the paper was presented to me, I had concerns. I do think it's about ensuring that we, as members, not one particular group, the entire membership actually understands that it's about scrutiny, it's about accountability, it's about transparency. And I think this is one of the reasons why it was brought to group leaders, and Councillor Hoyce was clear about his position. I've been very clear with officers about my position. I do support the improvements to governance, but it's not about taking away the responsibilities that we as members have in terms of keeping officers accountable, ensuring the processes are transparent, and we actually prove it to make things better for the citizens that we serve. So I do echo all the things that you said, and I think once the paper comes back to the group, I think we will actually have a better understanding. And I think it's important that obviously that from a protocol point of view, if it is about ensuring that the independents actually have prior briefings about whether it's the budget, but what I would say is that from the short time that I've been on the Fire Authority, access to officers is a lot easier than access to officers in our respected local authorities. Because if I want to get hold of an officer in Nottingham City Council, it's probably one of the hardest things to do, not knowing who the officer is, but also getting a hold of them. So I think the officers here, I think to my mind, what they do here is superb. And I think we as members have actually got a role in actually making things much better here. So I welcome your constructive criticism and feedback, and sure we can actually be a better fire authority as a result of it.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Harris?
Thank you. And I'm going to try not to overlap on what Councillor Zadrozny said, but equally probably try and emphasise some of the points to why we are frustrated with today's budget, because I appreciate there's various different degrees of experience around this table, not only in local government, far more experienced people than me, but also different experiences on the fire authority. I suppose your comment about the city council, I mean, I don't want to speak for my members to the left, but even as opposition at the county council, we feel like we have good access to the county staff, and certainly at the district we've got all the mobile phone numbers and stuff, and any time of the day we pick up the phone to any officer, so we do operate a little bit differently. But I would say that my experience of the fire authority is exactly what you've just said, and I think it's probably got a little bit more, I mean, Mr Parkin Craig was probably a little bit more open and about in his response there to Councillor Zadrozny than we'd normally expect, but that's equally why I think he does a good job normally. And he'll know that I was on his appointment panel. I think he's probably the best, I mean, I call him the chief executive, but chief officer in this. He's probably one of the best that I know, if not the best. But sometimes we have to remember that we're not friends, and Craig is probably somebody that unusually in local government I wouldn't mind grabbing a beer with sometimes, but we're here today to scrutinise each other, and all the signs that he loves to sit behind, and all you guys at the top table like to sit behind, that read good, excellent, great, have been achieved by us all together. And that is members providing our local knowledge and scrutiny, and the officers providing their professional expertise. And I think the way members have been treated recently, and I'm not just talking about independents, because I'm going to assume that Labour and the Tories have been treated in exactly the same way, has been disgusting. And I'm going to pick on something very trivial. Car parking today. Both you and I couldn't find a space because nobody saw it. It's like an oversight. Every staff member can find a thing, but the 19 members of the authority can't. We've paid, and you spoke in your opening remarks about the money we're generating from a sale in Gedlin from the previous authority. But forgetting the fact we've spent millions of pounds on this building, but we're treated by the police like some sort of spare part. We're escorted, members are escorted through this building, despite being the elected custodians of this authority. We're escorted through the building like naughty school children who aren't trusted to walk through our own building that we as taxpayers have paid for, and taxpayers have appointed us 19 people to run this building, but we have no access to it. I've never experienced that in my time in any building in local government. And I think the very fact that there's been no joint working on this building with the police since it's been built is a disgrace. There's all sorts of outweighs, and I think the fact that there's been no meeting, so I appreciate, Bev, this is your first budget, and we know you from our Ashfield days. We think you're very impressive as an officer, and we were very pleased with your appointment, and that's why we supported it. But it's got to be an oversight when no member of our group has been contacted up until Tuesday. And I'd remind you of what you asked me to do. On Tuesday, you phoned me up and tried to have a meeting to walk me through a £50 million budget. And yes, of course, we've seen parts of it throughout the committee structure. But you wanted to walk me through a £50 million budget in 24 hours. I mean, I like to think of myself as an intelligent person, but I've not got the brains to go through that in 24 hours. Certainly to digest it and sleep on it and ask for professional advice elsewhere like we always would do. But that's the reason we've achieved such success, because we've had the scrutiny and pushback. And of course, then you talk, and actually let's stop there and think, well, what has that scrutiny often led to? It's led to extra hours at Ashfield Fire Station, as an example. It's led to some great appointments of staff that Councillor Drosny touched on, but we supported the growth of the top table because we see the benefit that does. But it's a bit of a slap in the face when then that same top table wants to reduce the scrutiny of members. And if I turn my attention now to the committees, I don't want to embarrass him, but Councillor Nick Rain, I sit on his committee as a member. He's not somebody I know really outside this, but I can tell you what, he operates that HR committee very impressively. Unbelievably, he's given us access, we scrutinise papers, and I'd be sad to see that go. And let's not forget that this authority, as part of all this budget process, wants to get rid of the HR committee. It wants to get rid of many of the other committees that hold us to account. And I'd be sad for Nick, I'd be sad for the public, because that's how we scrutinise things. And I want to touch on a few things what that committee's done, and maybe not done. It won't have escaped members notice that we probably have more women sat round this table than firefighters who are female. And I think the HR committee has often spoke passionately about trying to include more, and I think this authority is doing a great job now on being more inclusive, and in getting more female members of staff in what has been traditionally a male-dominated industry is a fantastic step. But let's not also forget the same authority, and not included in this budget, and would have been a good inclusion in this budget, is the white working class of Ashfield. Craig will know that I spoke passionately at HR committees, and Nick will as well, about trying to include more from people from different economic spectrums, because you have to live close to a fire station to be a retained firefighter. It's ideal if you're a full-time firefighter as well. But there's no getting around the fact that we struggle to connect with those communities. But this is the work that the HR committee does day in, day out. Councillor Gul Khan, of course a former member of this committee, spoke extremely passionately about Asian community representation in the city. I think there's more Asian community members around this table than Asian firefighters. I think that's a disgrace, and the fact that Gul Khan was ignored time after time in the HR committee is frustrating. And I think if less effort was put into designing nice new officers, and actually more time listening to members of this authority who are appointed to oversee things, I think this budget would look a lot better and be more of an inclusive fire authority chair. But I'm very passionate about seeing the authority do well. We're very pleased with Ashfield Fire Station, the fact that it's now open full time, but of course that was done through the committees. You know, this authority made a decision, 7, 8 years, a decade ago, to close Ashfield Fire Station. And I want to remind members what happened. We had multiple fires, multiple car accidents, and interestingly, in the 3 months before the fire station opened back up full time, we had 4 deaths in houses in Kirkby and Ashfield within metres of the fire station. There was no engines. Engines didn't come from Ashfield Fire Station. They came from Alfreton. They came from Eastwood because we'd shut. And of course nobody knows, through the grace of God, whether those people wouldn't have had the same fate if the fire station was open full time. But I'll tell you what, they'd have had a better chance if there were people in the office waiting to go. But now they are. And we did that, and we should be proud of ourselves. That's why I'm extremely frustrated that leadership of this authority now wants to get rid of that same scrutiny that has done such a good job. That's what we're talking about today in this budget. What I'd like to do, I know a date's been mentioned, we have till the 12th of March to set this budget. I'm going to be voting against it today. I would encourage other members to do so. Let's come back in a week, over Zoom, I know we're all busy, in person, in Zoom, whatever, discuss some changes, then come back and vote it through when we can. We've got a fortnight, we've got ages. But I think for something so important, I think we haven't had the normal discussion, we haven't had the normal scrutiny. I know there's members in all groups that aren't happy with this budget today. It's probably the worst one I've ever seen at the Fire Authority, and I think that's happened because we've got new members of staff drawing up the budget, there's been no scrutiny from members, and I think ultimately the focus should be on the front line. The focus should be on investing in West Bridgeford Fire Station. The focus should be on making sure we've got an inclusive staff, paying firefighters more money. I mean, the pay award goes through some of our committees with a wince sometimes. We should be proud that we're paying people who work on the front line and putting their lives at risk more to do the job. But ultimately, investing in the staff, investing in what we're good at is what I want to achieve, and I think these are all the things that this budget, for the first time, doesn't do. And I'm upset, I'm sad, and I think ultimately it all comes back to the first thing I said, the way members are treated. And when you've got members like yourself parking on the grass this morning because nobody's thought about maybe your involvement in the authority, I think it's a sad state of affairs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hollis. I mean, yes, I did have to park my car on the grass, which I think isn't acceptable, and I do think that there is something to be said about the way the joint head office here is actually recognises the fire service. That said, I mean, I'm not too sure about not actually considering the budget today. Whilst I hear what you and Councillor Drosny saying about your concerns, I think I think we still would need to consider what the whole members actually want to say on the budget. What I would say in terms of your comments, I think I'm very proud to be sitting here as chair. The work that I've seen of the fire authority in the short time that I've been involved in, I think is superb. You know, you made reference to the fact that, you know, that there are, you know, in terms of inclusion, obviously there are concerns that you raised about white working class in Ashfield that we obviously officers need to take away and look at. But to see the diversity increase, I'm sure there are more Asian firefighters than there are members. I stand corrected on that, because I actually went to an event where I actually saw a number of Asian firefighters, and the fact that they had culturally sensitive firefighting uniform as well, I think just shows you how far the fire service has come. And if we look at the community risk management plan that's been drafted in terms of looking at the service as a whole, I think a number of things that you spoke about has actually been incorporated in that. So whilst I acknowledge the comments that you made, I think some of the things you said actually have been considered. What I would say is in terms of this budget, maybe as independents, you've not been briefed in the way that you would expect to be. But in terms of the scrutiny of the panels that the firefighting service offers as a whole, I think those have always been there, and you've always had access to officers. So I think that it's probably a bit unfair if you're sitting there saying that, you know, you were only called up 24 hours ago. You've been on the fire service a long time, Councillor Hollis, and you know this paper was presented in some form in December. It's been going through the normal channels. So I think there have been opportunities to consider that. That said, not the opportunity that you would have liked as an independent group, and I think that's something that the fire authority perhaps needs to ensure is, as a protocol, is considered going forward. I don't know whether, Bev, you want to come back and talk about whether or not, if the meeting was deferred, what that would actually mean, because I obviously, the people just need to understand before I pass on to other members.
My understanding is we need to set the preset by the 1st of March. We have a legal requirement to notify the billing authorities by the 1st of March what our precept is. So if we can't set the budget without agreeing the precept, we won't meet that statutory deadline.
When we're the building authority Ashfield, and it's the 12th.
But that's for you to set to your billing authority. We've got to notify you as a precepting authority, so you as a billing authority can then go forward with your council tax setting report.
Could set the precept but not the budget.
That's true.
Thank you, Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. I've spent 53 years in local government and public service around various places in the UK. I've only been on this fire authority 2 years or thereabouts, and under a year as a group leader. And I accept there's new members around this table, and the dynamics and perhaps the voting patterns will change, and that's the way it is. But personally speaking, and I believe on behalf of my group, we're pleased with the way this fire authority operates. What I've personally seen, I'm impressed. Yes, there's a role of scrutiny, clearly there is for us, and regarding today's main item, the budget, our representation at the Finance and Resources Committee has brought to my group the information, the documents that are fundamentally in front of us today. We have, I believe, asked the right questions at those Finance and Resources Committee meetings. We have scrutinised them, we've queried, we've had the answers and the responses we want. And I wouldn't want to defer the meeting, and I certainly wouldn't want any Teams or Zoom meetings. I am adamant on this. Face-to-face meetings on such an important topic for me is an essential, because there are many reasons why I don't like online, because, well, I'm not going to that now, but there are issues there. So our group will be supporting the budget today, and I give thanks now, while I remember, to Bev and her team for the amount of work you put in. We support the recommendations of this balanced budget and the £5 council tax increase. We hope there will be a multi-year government financial allocations in the near future to allow for better financial planning. We have consistently, I believe, said, I have, this year on year on year, it is not good in terms of looking down the track on future years. And so whoever can lobby and petition government to change that method of financial allocation, we would welcome. But to be brief, as I say, we will be supporting the document in front of us today. I think my fellow colleagues have other bits and pieces to raise, and well, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. Councillor Lee?
Thank you. You've had the good cop, now I'm the bad cop. I'm going to mention this first, but I want to get on to my main point. I've been advised that there's going to be a reduction in tech services at Newark and Highfields. Can I make sure that's not the case, and we're fully budgeted to bring forward those services as is, and if there is any changes, could you explain them today? But going on to, it is very telling here now that you no longer have the numbers. Let's be clear, you don't have the numbers. The Conservatives are now the largest group by 2. I am quite shocked actually that the PCC isn't here today. He's got voting rights, and you actually could do with him today. If we had all our members here and decided not to support you, your budget falls. How the person employed to run the police and the fire authority isn't here with his voting rights is actually quite a shock, to be fair. And I thought it was because the deputy was here, but they haven't got voting rights, so that he isn't here. I hope you would be ringing him and making sure he is now here at every meeting, because at the end of the day, that's what he's paid for. Now we are the largest group, and I said I am the bad cop, is we need to be involved. The independents have been involved. They've been chairs, they have been a part of your authority controlling the council. We need to be involved. Okay, there's elections coming up and everything could change. However, until that happens, we are 8 votes, and I think you can now tell the independents aren't supporting you anymore. It looks like they're not supporting you anymore. You've no longer got the numbers. You could be out on your ear by the next meeting. Now, that's politics. However, we need to now be involved in the conversations, and I agree with my independent colleagues to a certain extent, is saying that you haven't got the numbers to get your budget through. You should have been on the phone to our leader immediately saying we haven't got the numbers, how can we work through? Now luckily we supported you today, but you're not always going to have that. We need to make sure that, as the independents say, that whoever is here after the elections, that this is the fire authority. We represent the fire authority, and we are second-class citizens here. The police, this is the police building that we use, and that needs to change. And if it's not going to change, then we need to have quite a blunt conversation with the PCC, the Police Crime Commission. He needs to have a conversation on our behalf as well, because this is a shared building. But it very much feels like we've got the old building and the police have the new building. It's not on. It's not on, and it needs to change. And that conversation needs to be had. Now, if you can't have that because you're too close to it, then I'm sure Jason or our leader would be willing to have that conversation with the Police Crime Commissioner. But the one thing that we've always supported the budget here, because we know that not supporting the budget here means cuts in services, let's be clear, is the services going up in price, is everything costs more money each year, and you can't make cuts when it comes to saving people's lives. That's something we've always said here, and that's something that we need to carry on. And taking politics away from it is we need to make sure the services carry on. So the question to you is, if we don't set the budget today, if we don't increase it to £5, would cuts need to be made, and where? Would we expect cuts in Newark? I'm guessing we would if we had to cut the budget. Could you just explain more about that, of what we would have to do if we didn't increase the council tax today?
No, thank you for that, Councillor Lee. And what I would say is I've actually reached out to the leader of the Conservative group, actually, in terms of the budget. So that was actually done because I was concerned, and I do agree with you that we don't have the numbers, and we do need to work better together. One of the things that I do enjoy about the fire priority is that generally speaking, we take politics out of it, but clearly today we've seen politics actually at the forefront of it. And my thing is about the actual people that we actually serve. But clearly, come the 1st of May, they've come to a completely different makeup of individuals, and I might not be sitting here. And I think that's something that we all acknowledge is part of politics. I'll ask Bev if you could come in and actually answer the question specifically about if with the budget's not passed, what are the options, and actually respond to the point about the tech you said?
Yeah, the tech service in Newark and Highfields.
Yeah, I mean, the impact of going with a 0% increase is outlined in Table 2 of the report, so it shows that we'd have a gap therefore of just £2 million for this year. So the impact, you'd look at either, potentially cutting your services or using your reserves to fund that. But if you used your reserves all at the moment to fund that, then obviously that means the gap going forward, if you look at it, goes to 4 million next year and 6 million the year after. So you'd definitely then be looking at having to cut services the year after.
Thank you.
Yeah. On the tech rescue thing, there are no proposals around cuts, and I know, Councillor, you've got a close relationship with Newark in particular, so I know that. You will know we've been very clear and obvious in your community risk management plan, a review of specialist rescue capability, because it's been the same model in place for a number of years and things are changing. So things like there's more flooding, we may want to see an investment in flooding beyond 2 stations across the authority, and that work has started as part of that. Whether that throws savings or not, or an opportunity for savings, I guess we'll present that to members at some other time, but there are no plans on the table at the moment to cut in Newark and Highfields. There's lots of work ongoing to review the capability that those 2 sites also offer.
And I appreciate that, and I expected that would be the answer, but it's always nice to draw out the answer, so then there can't be any rumours behind the scenes.
I have regular visits to the stations. Area manager response is in regular conversation with those 2 stations in particular over a number of things. There are a number of things around those sites and those capabilities that national trade unions not necessarily helpful in terms of challenging their view about it, because they don't see it as being in the firefighters' role to do that. I clearly disagree with them, but that'll play out somewhere else. But if there are any proposals for that, it'll be coming back to members first. Around the general courts, obviously Bev's clear about the table. We've also presented around the areas of savings that don't involve pay in previous revenue and capital monitoring reports. Those big numbers, if it's not supported, probably only means staff, and very, very quickly. And if for those members that were on the authority when I first took over as chief, we didn't know whether it was a £2.2 million deficit in the February of that year and a £3.3 million deficit in the September, and we went out to consultation that created anxiety in the organisation. I'm hoping we don't get to that sort of place. You do have the flexibility as a fire authority to go above the level. You've been given that flexibility. If I was under a mayoral system, I don't have the barriers. So Andy Burnham, I'll use Andy in Manchester, he's putting quite high. He's actually putting fire appliances back because he's able to increase taxation locally much higher than you are as a fire authority. So governance across the country creates some challenges for you as members, as fire authorities, about what you can raise. Hopefully that's useful in terms of context, Councillor.
And Councillor, coming back to your point about the Police and Crime Commissioner, I do agree with you. It's unfortunate, and I understand there are circumstances why he's not here today. But in terms of conversation to have about the police and the joint quarters, I don't have an issue with that. It is unfortunate that we turn up today and the fire authority members, there is not adequate provision being made for parking, and I'll have to park. Probably when I get outside, my car's probably not even going to be there. But there you go. But I do take your point. We need to look at that. I've got a couple of people. So Councillor Clark and then Councillor.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And brings us back to our tax things, which we've got to agree council tax today. Whether we like it or whether we don't like it, that has to be agreed. We have to set a legal budget, and that's number one priority of all of this today. The things that you brought up, Jason, is that I think that there's some really constructive criticism there, and I think we should be looking at that, but not in this arena now. I think what we've had before is we've had. I've been on here several years. I won't be on after May. I've decided not to stand on there. Well, I will be standing, but I'm not going to hopefully come on to the fire authority. You've steered us through it, along with the staff, those on the actual footplate that are out there every day, risking their lives. You've managed through COVID, you've managed through all the various other things that came at us from different things, and also the assault on funding. And we can all go on about that, because I hate it, on television, well, we had 14 years of not funding. That's history now. We came through that. We've got a budget that stacks up, and thanks to people like Bev, we've got a budget there that we can read and see what's going off in it. And I don't see any reason today why we shouldn't support this. I mean, I will be supporting this budget, and hope it's moved quickly now and we move on to that. But for Jason's point, is that we must have a look. There's a lot of heartfelt concerns there, and I think we've got to go away, you as the chair, the vice chair, etc., and the chief have got to say, right, how do we get some consensus around this and get some of it solved? You mentioned about the Ashfield fire station. I didn't like that decision at all, but eventually, unfortunately, people did lose their lives. But now we brought that back in because we actually brought it back into here and discussed it between ourselves, and we actually looked at this. Really is a sensible idea. Keep that station open. But you've had to deal, Chief. You've had to deal with cutting. If you go around fire stations now, there's one or two engines. I think we might have 2 engines on London Road. Everywhere else, we've been cut and cut and cut. And to keep that service here with an advancing city and a city that's moving forward with all the building, all the things like that, we've got to protect those people, and we'll have to do it. And I'd sooner get that through and then discuss amongst ourselves, so that we say, how can we improve things in the future? Excuse me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And it comes back to the 3-year settlements, and actually going back to government saying actually we need far more money than we're actually getting at the moment. But I think there are three more hands. So if I bring in Councillor Rain, Councillor Butler, and Councillor Candola, and Councillor Rawlin, I think then we'll have to move on.
Is it me? Thank you, Chair. It's a bit of a different meeting, this one, to what we're used to, but it's a welcome to 2 new colleagues. I'll share some of the concerns that have been mentioned in terms of the building, etc. I won't go over them, and I've had to park somewhere. I've got my eye on the watch, actually, thinking, am I going to get ticketed for it? But there is that, and you do sometimes feel like a second-class citizen. I think that those points are completely valid. I'd also thank Councillor Hollis for his kind words. I'm a big, I think we do some excellent work on the committees, and we do that in a non-sectarian way. I always see myself here as very different. People who know me, I'm actually a highly political person. Some people might say quite partisan. Some people might, Councillor Rawls laughing, but it's a bit different. But I do think here we work well. I see this as a very much a public service role, where you come in and you think, how we're here to serve the citizens of Nottingham City and Nottinghamshire, and do what you can. And why I'm concerned about the budget, I agree with the Councillor Upton, we should have multi-year settlements, we should have, in local government, that's absolutely completely valid. I'm concerned about not setting a precept, and I say this every year, and I totally disagree with council tax. I think it's regressive, I think it should have been overhauled, it's politically difficult. But we're in a situation where, a couple of years ago, we had to fight, and I was very vocal about not making cuts on this authority, not making cuts to fire appliances on London Road. not making cuts to West Bridgeford, which isn't in our area, and was suggested by members of the Conservative group, which I fully supported. So we have to think about, if we don't set a budget, you know, what that will mean. And also, I think sometimes we can be robust on here, and I'm glad people have been robust, but we need to think that, you know, people are watching, and the people who run the authority, really, with the respect to people on the top table who are excellent, are the workforce who might be watching us, who are downstairs, who I do hope get more than a 2% pay rise. I know it's been factored in. I'm slightly concerned if that's the case, because I think they deserve more, and you know, because we've had years really of held back pay. That has got to be a challenge for us. So I'm going to vote in favour of it. I am going to vote to put council tax, but I am obviously saying on record, I really don't think that that's the way that things should have been funded so much. I do think the taxation system in this country is onerous on working people in particular. But we don't really have a choice in this situation. It's difficult, and obviously as councillors, I'm speaking as a city council, we're sat in far worse meetings about finance at the moment. We're making strides, but it is very difficult. It's a very difficult time to be in public service. So I thank Bev for her report and the others, and our workforce for their work, and I will vote in favour for that reason. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Actually, most of my points have been picked up. Some very interesting comments from Jason and Tom. We are where we are, perhaps, you know, lessons being learnt and all the rest of it. I'd remind colleagues, though, that the recommendation that we're being asked to take today is the result of a decision taken by the Finance Committee back in January. Exactly. That was, and it says in the report, it was a unanimous decision by the Finance Committee, and the Finance Committee is a cross-party committee.
Sorry, just a correction there. Our members aren't allocated seats on every committee.
Oh, okay. Well, fine. I'll accept that. Well, okay. It was cross-party in so much as the parties, the different parties there, and I can say that a lot of discussion went into that, and indeed we caused a bit of excitement in the press, which you don't often get with fire authority, because there was a reporter here who picked up on the fact that I and the Conservative colleagues were supporting that £5 recommendation, and we said reluctantly, and that was a fact, because whether we're Conservative or Independent or anyone, no one is particularly happy and doesn't like to support council tax increases, which at the end of the day our residents are going to have to pay. But the facts that we were given at that committee meeting meant that really, given the funding regime and the way it all works, is not ideal, but it's the world we're in. It's a decision that the committee took, and we were given various options on that day. So hence the reason we're here today, to either agree with that recommendation or not, which we'll be doing shortly. And for the record, I will be supporting the recommendation. With regards to communications between members and officers and the fire authority, I think we've all perhaps could do a little bit better, if I'm honest, on both sides. And indeed, in the when I say both sides, on the staff officer side and the members side, and indeed, when you look at page 6 of the minutes of the previous full authority meeting, it says members were reminded they should they have any questions regarding the service finances or require further explanation, they are free to contact Bev and members of the finance team. Some members may have done that, some may not have done. And likewise, I'll also put a plug in general member involvement of the fire authority, is that every now and again they hold these member seminars, and I have to say that attendance is awful, and it's embarrassing, frankly. And I know, and again, we are all very, very busy. We know only too well that, but these member seminars are put on where any aspect of the fire authority is raised and discussed. It's not a meeting. It's literally presentation, discussions, conversation, all the rest of it. I don't know if there's any more plans to hold those, but if there are, I would really encourage members to attend those if they can, because you actually pick up a lot from those. And then finally, on the car parking issue, I'm sure that staff and employees and the public watching are not the least bit worried about what we as members are suffering today with inconvenient car parking. But what I would say, it's interesting to note the number of cars that have had to park on double yellow lines in the car park, and thank goodness that parking is no longer a police responsibility. So with those points in mind, I think, as I say, a lot of interesting, serious points have been raised this morning. And at the end of the day, we are on a very serious business, but I think we need to move on.
Thank you. I think we do need to move on, but thank you, Councillor Butler, for your comment, especially around the member seminar, because for me as chair, I think for someone who's relatively new to the Fire Authority, that's an opportunity for actually get to know the depth and breadth of the fire service outside the committee structure, and actually ask some questions that you perhaps don't want to ask on camera. So I think, I'd encourage members to actually attend those as much as they can. They are planned, as I understand, that they are normally generally twice a year. Perhaps going to look at maybe having them one after the AGM, but I think they provide an opportunity, especially for new members, to get a better understanding of the Fire Authority, actually get to know the members of the Fire Authority and understand the work of the Fire Authority. So we've got Councillor Candole and Councillor Ruler. I think we'll have to move on. Not to say that this isn't an important item, because this is a crucial item and perhaps the most important item on the agenda. Councillor Candole.
I just want to confirm, the PCC has been mentioned twice. He's very committed and he takes his responsibilities serious on this role. Due to unforeseen circumstances, he cannot attend. Prior to Christmas, we looked at my role as a deputy and my voting rights, and before Christmas it was quite clear I could vote, but now it's looking at clarity going forward if I can or cannot vote, which I'll find out hopefully next week. So that is the situation, but he would be here and he does take his responsibilities very seriously, but due to unforeseen circumstances he cannot be here today. Thank you.
Just to be clear on the question of voting today on the budget, the Deputy PCC cannot vote on the budget item. There is a degree of ambiguity on voting on other items, which I am looking further into. But there are conflicts around the legislation and different views on that. But definitely today there is no vote on the budget for the Deputy PCC.
Chair, if I just want to come back just to clear something up. Our group is very impressed by the Deputy Crime Commissioner. It's not a slight on her hand, but I think like everybody else, I think there's probably more sightings of Lord Lucan in Nottinghamshire than there is of the Crime Commissioner. That's the core problem we've got.
Councillor Rule.
Thanks, Chair. Just a point of clarification, if I may. My understanding from the members' seminar with regard to the subcommittee changes that were happening is not that committees were being subcommittees were being got rid of as such; they were being merged. Is that now altered?
What I would say is that what was put forward to the members' seminar was a discussion document looking at options. So there are no proposals to do anything at this moment in time. It was looking at options and having that discussion. I've heard very clearly the views of members, and as a result of hearing those views, I will take those into account along with the other officers, and there will be further discussions, but I'm left in no doubt as to members' feelings.
Okay, I think, as chair, I'm proposing we actually take the report and members actually vote on the recommendations. I do agree that there are a number of key matters that are raised concerning the treatment of members and how we can actually improve the joint working of the police and the fire authority. And I think that's something that we need to take outside the meeting. There are other matters in terms of governance that I think that have been raised, and I've not actually made my position clear with officers where I stand on those, but it's for officers to bring back a revised paper to committee to consider. And obviously clearly there are matters that individual groups will actually want to raise with myself and the chief. But I think the key thing now, as I understand it, is that there will be a recorded vote on the recommendations, which are to agree the recommendations of the Finance and Resources Committee Fire Authority, and there will be a £5 council tax increase. Approve the 25-26 precept level to be identified in the billing authorities based in the information set out in Section 2 and Appendix C as required by statute. Approve the charges and fees for 25-26 as set out in Appendix D. Approve the continued payment of members' allowances for 25-6 in accordance with the approved pay scheme. I think it's that. You need to go around, Mark.
Yeah, so as I call out your name individually, could you indicate whether you're for, against, or whether you abstain, please? So, Councillor Winter?
For.
Councillor Fielding?
For.
Councillor Butler?
For.
Councillor Clark?
For.
Councillor Hollis?
Against.
Councillor Anwar Khan?
For.
Councillor Lee?
For.
Councillor Patel?
For.
Councillor Rain?
For.
Councillor Riaz?
For.
Councillor Rule?
For.
Councillor Turner?
For.
Councillor Upton?
For.
Councillor Helen Ann Smith?
Against.
Councillor Tom Smith?
For.
Councillor Zadrozny?
Against.
Thank you.
Thank you, members. That's carried, but obviously recognising that there is some work to be done, and I think what we as authority members need to obviously take note of what decision has been made today, and actually how we move forward as a result from the feedback that we've received. So if we could move onto item 7, the Prudential Code of Capital Finance for 25-26. This is a report to be approved by members. Bev, do you want to take us through the report?
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report, or the report's required under the 6th Prudential Code for Capital Financing, and the purpose of the report is to go through the capital plans and set the prudential limits for the year ahead that we'll then monitor against. So the Local Government Act 2003 set up a framework for financing capital investments, and that introduced the Chartered Institute of Public Finance Prudential Code. The Prudential Code requires that we have a capital strategy, so that capital strategy was set out in the medium-term financial strategy that was presented to our authority on the 13th of December. And the Prudential Code then sets out a number of indicators which we have to set and then monitor again to support decision making. So the report sets out the proposed Prudential and Treasury indicators for 25-26. The indicators are, there's no change to the indicators in terms of what the indicators are. They're as have been set in previous years. They've obviously been updated to reflect the impact of the current and forecast capital programme going forward and the impact that then has on those indicators. The one change that we had to consider in terms of setting the indicators this year was the introduction of IFRS, which is International Financial Reporting Standard 16, which is about leases. Which would mean that those leases then became part of our capital financing requirement, and we'd have to take that into account in the indicators that we set. We're not in a position at the moment where that's had any impact for us, and we haven't got any leases, but that is the case where that needs to be taken into account and brought on balance sheet. So at this point that's not had any impact, and we'll obviously monitor that going forward and look at that in any decisions about leasing that are made going forward. So again, I'm happy to take any questions. I wasn't proposing to go through the report and go through the indicators in detail. They're obviously get monitored against then in the basis of our monitoring reports that we bring to Finance and Resources Committee, and then there's a mid-year review and an annual review looking backwards that's brought to this committee. So I'm happy to take any questions on that report.
Thank you, Chair. Do members have any questions on this report? Councillor Crossley?
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points. Bev, on the MRP ratios, which we reviewed in December, which was set at 8% at that point, we removed that upper limit. Did you foresee that it would have the impact of reducing that limit this year to 6.2, rather than giving us the flexibility to go up, as is in the table, up to 8.7 towards the end of the MTFS? Because wouldn't it be more prudent to remain it at 8 at this point rather than reduce it and then increase the flexibility later in the term? And also, and the limits for principal sums for longer than a year, we've kept that at 2 million consistently. What reviews have taken place of that?
Right.
And finally, through this and the Treasury management, which is the next one, there's no mention anywhere of implications for LOBO loans. Has that been reviewed as well?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
So in relation to the 8% target, obviously it was it was a long-term target that was set. So even within that, where we'd have your target that you set, we look at where we are in terms of what we think our projections are going to be and where we're going to be, and that's why we've set that at 6.2 for this year. The fact that we've removed the 8% as that longer term target in relation to the fact that in terms of our budget at the moment, obviously, like I say, we've got forecast deficits going forward, and part of the impact of that is caused by your capital financing, as all of the pressures are as well. So it needs to be considered in the context of the overall budget rather than having like a hard and fast limit that we might reach. We just need to consider that level in context of the overall budget and where we are and what our priorities are. That.
Okay, but in that, has it had an impact in terms of the reduction? So there's a 1.8% reduction.
No.
Has it had an impact?
No, because the forecast of what the impact of the costs are based on that forecast of where we think they actually are going to be and what our capital forecast is for the capital programme for this year.
Okay.
So that's why we then base what our capital charges are.
Okay.
Yeah. So no, it's not had any impact.
Okay. Then the limits for the principal sums, if they're invested for more than a year, we've set it consistently at 2 million.
We do review it on an annual basis as part of presenting the strategy, and we consider that in terms of with our Treasury advisors, so link our Treasury advisors. So we discuss and they look at the strategy, and we have a discussion about that. In terms of, we don't at the moment, we don't have any investments that are over a year anyway, so that's why we see 2 million as being a prudent amount. And in terms of the LOBO loans, we have got a LOBO loan, and we monitor that with the Treasury advisors, and obviously there's a point where the lender can call that, and at that point we can then decide to pay it back or take their new interest rate. They've not called it today.
There's no forecast risk on that?
No. I mean, we discussed it again with the Treasury advisors, and we will look at the potential, whether we can go back to the provider of that loan, and they may be able to look at whether it's cost effective to buy out of the loan, but we'll do an assessment of that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No, are we members happy to approve the report? Does someone say? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, very good. So, okay. I want to move on to item 8 with the Treasury Management Strategy. It kind of leads on from the Prudential code.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this again is an annual strategy that comes forward that sets out the approach and the strategy that we'll take in terms of managing the cash flows and the Treasury management going forward. So it includes the Treasury management strategy, it includes the minimum revenue provision policy for 25-26, and the Treasury management practices are also set out as one of the appendices. So in terms of the overall strategy, there's been no change in the approach in terms of that strategy, and the report goes through sort of borrowing strategy and the investment strategy. So in terms of where we are with our borrowing, in line with the capital programme, it's envisaged we will be taking out borrowing within the year. We'll obviously review that and keep that under review in terms of the capacity we have to internally borrow and use our internal reserves for that. But in the budget, the assumption is that we will be taking out other new loans to support the capital programme, and that's been built into the budget. And when we're looking at borrowing, we'd again get advice from the linked Treasury advisors, and would consider whether we commit to a longer term loan or a short term loan, depending on where the interest rates are. In terms of the investment strategy, we always consider the security of the investment first, the liquidity in terms of when we get the money back, and then the yield that we get for that. So we'll continue in terms of that being that approach that we take, and that's set out in the investment strategy. In terms of the MRP policy, the minimum revenue provision policy, so that is set out. Again, there's been no changes to that. It is set out as the same as it was for 24-25 in previous years. There's been no changes to it. And what that determines how we charge the borrowing cost to the revenue account in terms of it's the equivalent of your principal on a loan, and how you charge that to the revenue account, and then that forms part of the capital charges that are in the revenue budget. The TMPs are attached in full, and that's obviously quite a big document. The reason they're attached is because we've done a review of them to reflect the new Prudential code. Well, it came out in 2021, so there's some changes that we've had to reflect within the TMPs. So the changes that we've had to make in relation to that are an amendment to include environmental, social and governance policy, to consider that when you're taking out investments. But again, we'd only ever go and consider that once we've considered the security, liquidity and yield. We'd then look at any environmental or social impact it has. The requirement to produce the annual capital strategy is noted now in the practices. As I've said, we produced the capital strategy. It came to Fire Authority in December. There's the introduction of the liability benchmark, which is in the report, and there's some changes to definitions. The reports have also been updated just for housekeeping purposes in terms of updating like who our providers are in terms of our link Treasury advisors, and in relation to the roles and responsibilities within the finance team and the structure that's currently in that team, so it's been updated for that. So it's just minor changes really to the TMPs, but they just required to come for approval. So again, I'm happy to take any questions.
I mean, what I would say on the Treasury management strategy, Treasury management is an area that is not always easily digestible, and I think I welcome the fact that we have Treasury advisors, that we have 6 monthly reviews on it. But I guess the question I would ask is that, are there opportunities for training for members? Because I know that that's an area that I think when we think of interest rate risks, when we think of the liquidity and borrowing, it's an area that we need to think about going forward. So I think it's an opportunity. I don't know whether there is an opportunity for the Treasury advisor to come and provide training to members if need be, but I think it's an area that I think it's could be welcome. Councillor Green?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks both for the report. I always look on this with interest because, there's a number of things here that are totally out of our control, aren't they? And it's just, I'm not suggesting we're gambling, but as you mentioned there with interest rates, you look around the world at the situation today, and the price of energy and what could happen, global political affairs, etc. It's quite difficult, isn't it? Things, interest rates and stuff collected to that. I mean, in terms of our investments, I'll just, it's a thought that occurs to me when I read this, and we talk about, ethical investments and so on, looking at things that are good. I mean, one thing that would be good, I think, from our point of view, and something that I'd indicate, is looking at where we bank, whether it's a building society, whether it's a bank, whether we can invest more in some of our own communities, if that's possible or not. There's parts of the country where councils and other authorities have used something to actually stimulate economic development more in some of the areas. Council and others were talking about perhaps some more deprived parts of the county. There's the same in the city, etc. We could use our money perhaps more wisely in that respect. I don't know, it's not criticism. I'm just thinking when I read this, there's a number of things that spring to mind. Some of it is slightly over my head, and other things obviously I'm looking at, say, buying a house, and I'm thinking stuff like interest rates, etc. We could get caught out, but that's going to be the same for any public body or business, I suppose. Sorry if that was a bit rambling there.
No, that's fine. I mean, we obviously consider where we place our money and within the investment strategy. The purpose of bringing in that ESG part of the policy is so that you consider those sort of the impact that has and the value that your investments could work towards in terms of environmental, social responsibilities. So we can start to consider that. A lot of our investments at the moment, because they're held quite short, so they are in core accounts. Obviously, sometimes you're looking at longer term investments to get those sort of benefits. So that depends on where we are with our cash flow. But we can, we can take that on board going forward.
Councillor Hollis?
Yeah, we won't be surprised to know, Nick won't be surprised, I agree with everything he's just said, and I think if there is a way of looking at, I appreciate it might be short term there, but we're talking about big sums of money here, and actually it's not just about the money, it's about what we say as an authority, what we stand by, and if I draw the example to something that the independent colleagues are very passionate about on the pension committee, for example, at the county council, which of course oversees many of the pensions of our employees, interestingly not from firefighters, but police, city and county as well, members of staff. I seriously object to the fact that the county council pension fund invests in arms. And let's not forget what kind of climate we're in. Much of those arms are being used by Israel, but in Gaza, across the world, in Ukraine, and all the stuff that I think morally we object to, but the county council pension fund invests in those arms. And yes, it might be the best investment financially, but it's certainly not morally the thing we should be doing. And I don't think it's the fault of anybody in this room, because I think ultimately you have to decide whether you want to follow the advice. And I think the advice often members follow is they want to see the best financial investment. But I think when we're talking about our money at the Fire Authority, and there's a reason why the Fire Authority has one of the best public reputations of any. I mean, I think politicians would dream of the reputation of a firefighter public view, and the police officer would dream of a view of a firefighter. But I think that should then also come back to the investments. I think if there is a way that we can insist, and of course the changes that are mentioned here you touched on, really pleased you did, I fully support it. And I think if there's a way that some of the comments that Councillor Rain mentioned can be incorporated as well, and we go one step further to look at ethical banking as well, but certainly more ethical investments to make sure that we aren't certainly investing in arms. We aren't investing in fossil fuels. Yes, it might not be always the best financial return, but let's be truthful, it's marginal. And I think if we can hold our heads high and say that our money is being invested in greener solutions or more positive solutions, so it's working for the community while it's sat in the bank, it's a no-brainer. And I think other authorities will follow our lead. So I'm really supportive of what's in here, and I appreciate the work you're doing, Beth.
I think that's an important point, but I'm sure take that away. I think we all need to support the firefighting investing ethically, and that's, if we can invest locally, I think that'd be even better. Got Councillor Lee and Councillor Upton.
Thank you. I'm sure when you start talking about investments in arms, that you're going to expect somebody that was in the military to talk. The problem you have is when you say you don't want, it's a complicated issue. When you say you don't want to invest in arms, I get the sentiment, I really do. However, as we know here, is the arms industry and civil industry combined. You have service providers that provide civil services as well as military arms, and there's, when you invest in one, you invest in the company as a whole. We know that.
The SARB.
Yeah, I was going to mention names, but yes, the SARB in particular, they actually make rocket launchers that were used in the defence of Ukraine and used by the military forces. They also make alarm systems and security systems. So there's that complication, is do you not want to invest in one when you invest in the other? Personally, I have no issue with investing in arms as long as it's the right arms. Because let's be honest, you've got body arms, you have helmets, you have defence rockets that shoot down other rockets, you have armed vehicles that protect people, but then you have the naughty arms, you have the nuclear weapons that you don't want to invest in, or landmines that you really don't want to invest in. Trust me, somebody that drove over a landmine, they're not nice pieces of kit, but you have to make that mind up on what you want to invest in, what you don't want to invest in. And let's talk about, I don't want to talk about any country in particular because it's a sensitive subject, but in some cases you want to help countries defend themselves and people to defend themselves. They're the same arms that are used offensively in elsewhere. So you do have to be really careful when you think you don't want to invest in arms. If that's what you want to do, then fine, but there's pros and cons. Like I said, helmets, body arms, it's all defence. And I'm more than happy to have that conversation, have that quite frank, open conversation. And I think that's something that we're always good at here at the fire authorities, having them quite honest conversations. I know when we were talking about the Saab contract, we also had them frank, open conversations. And I'm always happy to have them.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Upton?
Yes, to be brief, I don't think this meeting is the place and the time to discuss that wider debate, and I'd be surprised if there is a consensus around the table. I just refer you to page 78, 79, Appendix E, Appendix F of the report, and I mean that gives all about risk, is it not? Counterparty risks across the marketplace, and as I read that, I'm not a Treasury expert, but it gives me a significant degree of comfort that you are spreading risk of your investment both within the UK and Appendix F shows you the Fitch ratings for other countries abroad. So I think there's a wider debate to be had at another meeting, but I'm content with the report shown, and particularly page 78 and 79.
I think what today's meeting has shown that there are lots of things that we need to talk about, but today's not necessarily the right time for them. But I think in terms of the Treasury management strategy, are members happy to approve? Oh, sorry, Jason.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of quick points. I've got a question about VRP circumstances and where you might feel that was prudent to recommend a charge. And also a question, if there is an international investment, have we got anything that's less than AAA invested currently? And finally, Kath, if you're doing the minutes, there's a double full stop in 2.57 if you want to take that out. Come on. Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of VRP, so voluntary revenue provision, it'd be an option if you've got an underspend basically in a year that you then set aside more money than you need to. And then it'd obviously the impact of that is that it would reduce your borrowing costs going forward then, because your CFR would come down, so you'd have less then to charge over the remaining years going forward. So that's why you consider doing VRP. But obviously you'd consider that in the round of what else you could use that money for. So that's where you'd consider it. And in terms of, you asked about international investments, well, we haven't got any at the moment, so no, we don't hold anything.
With that, were members happy to approve the recommendations, Treasury Management Strategy 25-26, the minimum revenue provision policy for 25-26 as set out in sections 2.53 and 2.58?
Agreed.
Good. Move to item 9, which is the community risk management plan. I think Mick's still in that. I think members have been involved. This is one area that members have been involved in from the start. I remember becoming on the committee back in May last year, and there was a detailed discussion around the community risk management plan. Today Mick will be actually presenting that, and I'm sure, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Quite right. This piece of work has been in progress now for the past 12 months. And there's been a lot of hard work and planning that's been undertaken to bring it to this position today. It's quite a substantial document. The report, whilst only covers 4 or 5 pages, there are 3 appendices that support that. First of all, the draft CRMP, which is here as part of the recommendations for your approval. The outcomes of the consultation activities that were undertaken in terms of support of the draft CRMP, and then the annual action plan, which is a more detailed report detailing our priorities over the next 12 months. Just as really members will be very much aware, and I won't go into too much detail as Chair's already identified, this is about the 3rd time that reports actually come to Fire Authority. First of all, our initial intent and a discussion about our priorities. Secondly, a draft consultation document that came in September. And so this is the combination of all that work, bringing it together for that final document. The CRMP, particularly for new members of the Fire Authority, it is a requirement of the national framework, which is the government's expectation on fire and rescue services that we do produce an integrated risk management plan. A CRMP, which is a community risk management plan, is a integrated risk management plan. What's importantly is when we design and build the CRMP, it's done in a transparent and accountable way, and we encourage involvement from our communities with regards to shaping the future of the service in its direction. We also take into consideration best practice. We work in guidance with the National Fire Chief Council's CRMP professional standards, and we also take on board the recommendations from the Magistrates Inspectorate as well. As already stated in Appendix A, there is the draft there is the draft plan for your approval today, and as detailed in 2.3 of the report, it's a follow-on of the 6 strategic goals. The 6 strategic goals are the same 6 strategic goals that we had in our previous CRMP, and we felt at the time, as agreed by members, they would form part of the consistent priorities as we move forward. Following the consultation, which I'll cover very briefly, we have made some amendments based upon the engagements that we've had with our communities as detailed in 2.6. I don't plan to go through every single change that we've made in terms of the draft, but happy to if members request that. But as detailed in there in paragraph 2.6, those are the changes that we've undertaken. Moving on to the CRMP consultation, I gave an overview of this at the members' seminar. There is a detailed report in Appendix B, but as a brief summary, we have significant support from the consultation activities that have been undertaken from the communities that we've engaged with for the activities that we are planning to undertake over the next 3 years. That includes the 6 strategic priorities. A decision but as members will be very much more aware of than myself, public consultation can be quite challenging, and so we've listened and took feedback and listened to members' comments from previous CRMPs. This is the 3rd CRMP that I've been involved in since working for this authority. So we listened to the feedback, so we took the decision that instead of engaging with a third party to lead on the consultation, we took the decision and brought those efforts and that responsibility in-house. And it's pleasing to report, as detailed throughout the report, that has proved very successful. And as detailed in 2.11, the consultation period ran for 9 weeks from the 30th September through to the 30th of November. We've conducted both focus groups, online, leafleting. We've done a plethora of different engagement activities, and I think it's fair to say that this has been our most successful compared to the past 2 times that we've undertaken the consultation process in terms of the breadth of engagement. It's still very challenging. I would still love the numbers to be extremely high, I really would, but in terms of the work that's been done, it's both in terms of qualitatively and quantitative data, it's the best we've been able to achieve compared to previous times. Particularly pleasing because there was a lesson that we needed to learn from previous consultation is in terms of the achievements in consultation with minoritized groups from across both the city and the county. I'm not going to go into all the details in terms of the consultation, but again, I'll just finish briefly off in terms of the annual delivery plan, and then I'll be open for questions. The annual delivery plan is the focus of the business year ahead, and it does highlight the actions the service aims to take over the next 12 months. They are all driven by the 6 strategic plans that are contained within the CRMP. In terms of accessibility, we did ask the question about how the community wanted to continue engage with the CRMP and the ADP, and the majority of the feedback was that people were happy and did actually prefer the accessibility by a PDF version online. So we've taken that on board and we'll as we move forward and we report back on our progress against the CRMB in terms of the annual statement of assurance which we produce on an annual basis, we'll certainly take that consultation back and give it consideration as we move forward. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Nick. And before I also bring members in, I think this to my mind is an example of work that, as the fire service, we've done collectively, engaging members, engaging with stakeholders, and engaging with staff. When we're actually looking at mitigating risks for the community for the next 3 years. And I think it's an example of the way we should continue to work. And I have to say, obviously, thank to Mick and his team for actually working through this. I mean, I had the opportunity to attend some of the briefing sessions where stakeholders from the community gave their views on this. So for me, this is a powerful piece of work, and actually in terms of delivering the plan for the fire project the next 3 years. Councillor Hollis.
Thank you, Chair. And I think probably Mick does himself a disservice actually, because I think he probably reaches out to the community and members probably as much as any officer I know does, and I think him and Damien do a great job in what they do. But I won't touch on, obviously members will see page 174 and the strategic goals. I think my dissatisfaction and disagreement with some of them has already been discussed, so I'm not going to overlap that. I'm going to stick to a positive and a couple of questions which hopefully can enlighten me and enlighten other members, which is strategic goal 1 with prevention. Particularly when I'm out in the community, I see members of the fire service in people's homes putting smoke alarms up. And I'd say it's fantastic. I mean, I've got to say, and they always, I don't know whether all these people are always given a brief on who the authority members are. I think it's amazing now. They always say hello to me, stop what they're doing, and explain why they're here, and I think it's really great. But one thing I certainly know is I do tend to see them in more affluent parts of my community, and I don't know whether that's because they're more engaged with asking for these things, or the service providers they're involved with. And this isn't meant as a criticism, because I presume you're probably aware of the same thing. I'm just wondering how, obviously there's disengagement from all sorts of parts of the community. For Ashfield it tends to be on an economic scale, I think in the city it tends to be on different factors, but how do we engage more with making sure we get our prevention measures? Because let's be truthful, often the problems also tend to come from the same areas, and we want to make sure we're ticking that box. And I'm proud of what they do, and I've seen them probably this week alone. I think I've seen them in 2 people's homes in Huthwaite alone. It's great. I mean, I don't want to go up some of the ladders they go up to, but it's really impressive. But just allocation of that, I see we've quoted 50,000. How are those 50,000 decided?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Take on board your feedback, and we can definitely look into those cases. What I would say is we will have a very high level of assurance around our Charlie profile that we talk about a lot at the Community Safety Committee. In terms of the methodology around approaching and targeting our interactions, it's very, very detailed. We do target socioeconomic factors as well as other factors which increase the prevalence of people being at risk from fire. It's very targeted. I would say we also are very detailed now in terms of the evaluation of that and making sure we're monitoring it. That's not to say that we don't attend some properties in more affluent areas of society, because those residents might meet other risk factors such as age or disability or other impairments that may lead them to be high risk from fire, but very much we are targeted in terms of all of our interactions now. We've just introduced a new system through our online portal for referrals, as well as our partner referrals, and all of those are filtered to make sure we're targeting our resources to those most in need. At the latest round of assurance that was undertaken, our demographics for targeting are some of the best in the country in terms of making sure that we meet the people who need us the most. I can give you every assurance that it's very targeted, and we continue to make sure that our limited resources we do have are targeted at the right communities to make sure those at the greatest risk of injury from fire are met in terms of what they need. So we're happy to pick up any individual cases outside.
Councillor Smith?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The question I've got is based on
part of the information on page 154 to do with vehicle fires. And you might not have this information on you, so I understand, but it's just something that piques my interest. It says that the majority of vehicle fires that you attend are deliberate vehicle fires. Of that, what percentage would you say is deliberate? And of the ones that aren't, what percentage would you say are linked directly to the electric vehicles? And have the number of electric vehicle fires increased over the last couple of years? Because the perception of it is that it has, but I was just wondering if the data is there to actually back up that perception.
Thank you again, Councillor. I don't have that data to hand, but I can definitely provide that for you. What I can say is that the prevalence of electric vehicle fires has increased, but also the prevalence of electric vehicles in the community has as well. I think often they've received quite a lot more attention because of the disruption that happens around electric vehicle fires. They are more complicated. We have invested in new technology to help us deal with those, but they still present a really challenging hazard for firefighters in terms of that emerging technology. I can get that data for you and provide it. And again, it's something we continually review, both in terms of our operational activity, but also where the risk is within communities as well. So I can provide that to you after the meeting.
Yeah, that'd be really helpful, thank you for that. There was one just a few doors away from me that just randomly caught fire and couldn't actually work out why, so it's piqued my interest in electric vehicles. Thank you.
Councillor Patel?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to place my thanks to the officers on the work that they've done, especially putting the strategic plan on a page, because that's made reading so easy and so much better. And I keep saying this every meeting that, working with offenders and working in the prison, I know how hard it is to bring about changes. And the fact that, we've got such an ambitious group of people who are willing to, set such ambitious plans. I'm really pleased to see that they've covered almost all the areas, which is including, prevention as well as surface improvement, and most importantly, the constant engagement with people from diverse cultures, and also, the staff well-being, which is being also looked into. So I would really just like to put my thanks to all the officers who've put in all the work to bring up the strategic plan. It's really, really much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Councillor Khan?
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to ask a direct question, two questions on that. I think it's not the first time I'm asking this question. I think it's been asked in the past as well. On human resource and learning development, page 132, paragraph 4.2. My question on this, how does the service plan to address the workforce retention challenges and ensure the staff development aligns with the evolving emergency response needs? And on 5.5 paragraph, my question on that, what specific actions are being taken to increase the workforce diversity and ensure the recruitment strategies attract the underrepresented groups that we previously discussed as well. Thank you.
If you can, thank you, Councillor. Nick may have some views about the specifics. What you'll see in your CRMP is the strategies that sit under it, so the people and culture strategy. We've had a number of action plans in the past that have kind of looked at this, looked over there. So what we're trying to do is bring them to one place so that we can manage them and lead on them properly. You'll also know the work we did, and some councillors were here when we had the Into People work that was done. We provided you a report through Into People. I think it came to HR committee, where we met with many groups, particularly in the city, with an outside body that we weren't able to influence, to try and understand why we weren't getting the reach maybe into some communities. So as part of the CRMP process, you are asked to understand your communities, and when HMI come and do your inspection, our inspection that the authority see, is that they want to know about your understanding of communities. So we're trying to invest in who are our communities, because they are so different from the city to the north of the county. So we know that we've got not one size fits all. Council officers talked about socio-economic impact in the Ashfield district as well. So we need to understand our communities. We also need to make sure that we actually look like an employer that people want to work for. Culture. So we've got the people and culture strategy that will actually underpin that. when we get people in the organisation, very rarely do they want to leave. So, you know, in terms of the culture and working here, very few people fall out with us. We certainly do have people that fall out with us, but very few, thankfully. So in terms of that leadership side of things, where can people aspire to be in the organisation? Can they work their way through to be a principal officer? You know, you can clearly see representation is not there in that sense, but that's the UK fire service generally. What we still suffer from, of course, is that because we have so limited turnover, your numbers of, say, somebody you might identify as being a woman, for example, doesn't increase very quickly, because actually not a lot of people leave the organisation. If you look at wanting to be a whole-time firefighter, there was a period where we didn't recruit for 6 years. With, you know, budgetary constraints. When will be the next time we will recruit? Well, we've got to work through all that work as well. What we have got to do, though, is with the opportunity we do get, is that positive action. And some of the plans that we've done as well through our revamping of our community engagement team, so prevention and protection in terms of that side of it, we now got some lot more focus on what does positive action look like. And I don't mean positive action, it's 3 months before recruitment, let's do some positive action. It's positive action throughout the year, every year, and making sure those links with those community groups who are underrepresented do see us as an employer of choice and do want to come and work with us. And I think whilst you are in the organisation as well, it's feeling psychologically safe that you can be yourself regardless of who you identify as being. So it's really, really difficult in terms of doing it. It's not impossible, but we've got the opportunities when they come, even if they don't come across very often. Because if you think about whole-time workforce, you know, they are, 400 of the staff are whole-time, 300, 350 on stations. You've got 200 and something staff who are on call, who have got other jobs somewhere else. They work on pages, so they only come in, so we've got limited opportunity. So whether you're on call at Ashfield, you've got the area around Ashfield. If you're on call in East Leek, you've got the area around East Leek. That's who you're recruiting from. So we've got to take the opportunity above all else. But what I'm hoping is these are a point of reference, these documents. We're saying we're going to do things in a strategy, and hopefully through the future reports to committees and authority, you'll hold us to account. It's things like, as well, we've got strategic inclusion board after this where members can talk about what we're doing as well, and I know all members are welcome to that at the following of this meeting. So hopefully the CRMP and the strategies and then our actions, not just our words, from this point onwards, if members agree this, you'll see whether we're doing it or not.
We've got Councillor Drosnin before Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. I mean, I think it's a great report. It's much improved on the 21 one, and in terms of having a better cross-section of people responding. I'm interested to see how you've saved 23 grand and done that. I assume that's on consultancy fees. Okay, very good. In which case, I think the only point I've got to make is that these sorts of plans are always best if they're organic, constantly reviewed plan, and I'm very much hoping to see a very full fire authority presence at Ashfield Show again for 3 days in August. I think those sorts of events, I mean, there's never less than 20,000 people on Sutton Lawn at that time. They're the sort of events, I know the kids love pressing the sirens and stuff, but they're the sort of events while they're doing that we should be checking and balance this sort of thing with the parents and others that are passing by. So, I've got my council now doing it, roving around with iPads, asking people questions and citizen surveys and things. I think the authority ought to consider taking those opportunities to review some of this stuff more organically all year round, as you've just said, rather than just at recruitment times while we're there. 8th, 9th and 10th, put it in your diary.
I'm sure you'll be reminding us.
I will, Craig, very much.
Councillor Rain?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I mean, it's a report I'm proud of, really. I mean, there's a number of achievements. We look at the Emergency Service of the Year Award 2024, White Ribbon, Armed Forces Covenant, and so on. And we've done a lot of work in the HR committee. I mean, I thank Damien for their work in particular. And, you know, we are making improvements. And as the Chief said, there are difficulties with this because we are a decent employer on the whole. People do not leave, so you don't see that progress. And there are some other things in terms of the culture we're looking to improve, like, for example, in terms of our LGBTQ plus employees. Obviously, we have that, you know, there's a disconnect between the number we obviously do have and the number of people who are out at work in certain sections, I think, of our employment, and we're looking to improve that. I mean, it is positive in terms of 2 on 18 when you look at the responses, because there's been huge increases. Young people in particular, I think, were particularly disengaged. That's gone up massively. And also in terms of different demographics and underrepresented groups, there is an issue, I think, in the city and everywhere, I think, with socio-economic groups, and we have discussed that on the committee and we are going out with it. And one thing might be worth bearing in mind is sometimes with the electronic surveys, we all do them and it's great going out, but in sometimes there's a poverty of access to the internet. There's a statistic that always amazes me. There's about 25% of citizens in the city, and I'm sure it's the case in poorer parts of the county, that don't actually have access to the internet regularly at home. They might have a smartphone or they might not. So there's actually, you'd think it would be 100% now and everyone would have one, but actually that's not the case. So that's something we have looked at, and there are improvements. I mean, obviously we've got 453 responses from the public, and I'm sure we'll be looking to up that. And you know, but sometimes things move frustratingly slowly, but we are doing the last cohort. So we've looked at firefighters, etc., and who's applied for it is much more representative, and those changes are coming through. But it's slow for the reasons the chief outlined, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Are members happy to approve the report? I mean, thank you. I mean, I think it's, as I said, it's an excellent report. I mean, I've been taking the opportunity to go around the county, because being a city lass, I've been able to get out in the county. I've obviously been to Ashfield, been to Harwood, and I've got a few more trips to go, but it just shows you the difference in demographics and the challenges that we face as an authority in balancing those priorities within the city and the county. But as we can see from the report, there are significant improvements that have been made. Obviously, there's more to be done, but I think we all should be proud of where we've got to, and the fact that we got some accolades at the end of last year, being one of the best performing firefighters in the UK, in England, should I say, to be fair. I think it's something that we should all be proud of, but clearly there's still more work to be done, and we should continue to build on that. But I guess with that, we're happy to approve the risk management plan for 25 to 28, and obviously, as you said, we just need to obviously keep it organic and keep a review of it. I think we've got item 10, which is committee outcomes for noting, and I think it's now the exclusion of the public. So the exclusion of the public, to consider the excluding the public from the meeting during consideration of the remaining items in accordance with section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972 under schedule 12A part 1, on the basis that, having regard to all the circumstances, the public interest in maintaining an exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing this information. Thank you.